tension that we've got right now?
Well, Nara, I think that Peter Navarro's comments, I look at them in a similar way to the comments that you see occasionally from people in China saying that, maybe the U.S. Army or somebody else like that seeded the virus. There's that sort of thing where it may or may not be official government policy, but the fact that somebody with a title is allowed to say it is interesting to me. I don't think that that's necessarily the official U.S. position by any stretch. Peter Navarro is probably the most hawkish person on China in Donald Trump's White House, and he has lost key battles with this president before, so he does not necessarily speak for Donald Trump when he says things like that. But as I say, it's interesting in this moment that we're here right now that you see opinions like that being aired on national television.
Yeah, you have to feel, I suppose, that in some way, at least the White House doesn't necessarily object to him saying that, I suppose. But another interesting moment today, though, Derek, which is this meeting of the WHO, the World Health Assembly, and we know the pressures on China. I mean, in some cases specific about whether Taiwan should or should not have observer status. But that's kind of a way of piling the pressure on, isn't it?
Yeah, the attention on this cannot be overstated. I think usually you have these government, international sort of governing body meetings, and they sort of happen in obscurity, and things happen, and nobody pays much attention or cares. This one is very, very, very different. In fact, we got breaking news over the terminal just before I came on that said China's President Xi Jinping is going to make a speech at the opening ceremony of the 73rd World Health Assembly. This, according to the official Xinhua news agency, citing a foreign ministry spokeswoman. So you can tell how seriously China is taking this upcoming meeting.
Yeah, very interesting. And I know you'll be keeping a close eye on that, Derek. Also, of course, what we got before the weekend was the latest U.S. action against Huawei. How consequential is that beyond, of course, the impact on a number of chip makers?
I think this is actually quite consequential, and it comes in a different kind of line. This is not necessarily connected to broader U.S.-China trade tensions, but this is the sort of U.S. security concerns about Huawei. However, let's be candid, all of this kind of gets bundled in together, certainly on the Chinese side, considering it kind of one fight, and sometimes on the American side as well. I think this is actually quite a big thing. You saw, I think it puts some amount of tension in terms of Huawei's supply line, in terms of how much they take from abroad and elsewhere. There's a report from Nikkei that said that TSMC had stopped accepting new orders from Huawei after the rules. TSMC came back and said, no, this is a market rumor. We don't disclose details on orders from our customers. An earlier report out of Taipei said that TSMC had secured a $700 million rush order from Huawei. You can see how this is kind of this scurry and what will happen here and how do these supply lines work. Huawei, understand, is a flagship Chinese company. I think people outside of Asia may not appreciate how much Huawei means to China in terms of not just business but psyche, how much of a point of pride this company is, in the same way that Apple or Microsoft would be in the United States. Not just a company, it's a flagship kind of thing that you sit there and you say, look at that, this is what we stand for. An attack on that is seen by some as an attack on China itself.
Yeah, it's very, very significant, as you say, and very much the flagship, and everything will be read into that Beijing-Washington confrontation. Derek Wallback there, Bloomberg senior editor, joining us to talk about those growing tensions. And today we do have the World Health Organization Assembly meeting in Geneva. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Investors spent the weekend mulling a dire warning from the Fed. Late Friday, it warned of significant declines in stocks and other assets if the coronavirus pandemic deepens. The warning came in the Fed's twice-yearly financial stability report. For Wall Street, the pandemic is about more than just the latest disease statistics. It's also about confidence and America's willingness to venture out for work, shopping, and entertainment. And that could be the hardest part, according to strategist Jonathan Golub at Credit Suisse Securities. He thinks many Americans will be reluctant to leave their homes, even as restrictions ease.
There's almost a plateauing at around 2,000 deaths a day. What that means to me is that people are going to remain scared to go into public places.
And U.S. auto workers will begin returning to work this week, with GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler all planning to rev up at least some manufacturing operations. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
The Boston Symphony Orchestra presents BSO at Home. While you stay inside, enjoy a curated collection of archived concerts and behind-the-scenes stories from BSO musicians. BSO Homeschool provides lessons for music lovers of all ages. New performances and messages from musicians are added regularly. Enjoy these selections and much more at bso.org/at-home.
If you want to do something important, work in adult social care.
I'm Greg and I lead the team at a residential care home. Supporting people to live life to the fullest. It's an amazing job to have.
We are recruiting in your local area. We need you now, and they need you always. Care for others. Make a difference. Today. Search adult social care jobs now.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
At NatWest, we're putting our money where your business is. We've set aside £5 billion of working capital funding for our customers and have already lent over $3 billion to businesses like yours. So if you bank with NatWest and COVID-19 has affected your business, remember, every one of us is here to support you. Search NatWest Business Coronavirus.
Figures for RBS Group. Security may be required. Over 18s only. Subject to status. Business use only.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, all the warnings out there about what might be happening in the real economy, all with regard to US-China tensions, seem to be falling on deaf ears when it comes to risks assets today. 30 minutes into the market open in Europe, the Stoxx 600 up 1.8%. We did see global equities decline on the week last week. European Equity benchmarks, though, all firmly in the green today. FTSE 100 up 2.2%, the CAC 40 up more than 2%, the DAX higher by almost 2.5%, the IBEX and FTSE MIB firmly in the green. US futures also point to a strong day of gains. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all higher by at least 1.25 percentage point. In terms of the bad economic news, you've got Japan in recession. You've got Goldman talking about India having its worst recession ever. You've got warnings from Jerome Powell about the recovery taking a long time, perhaps going into 2021. And the Fed on Friday also warning that risk assets could be vulnerable if coronavirus and the pandemic persists. 10-year Treasury yield today is absolutely steady on a 64 handle. The 10-year Bund yield slips a basis point to negative 54. The 10-year gilt yield moves lower by 2 basis points. You had the BOE's chief economist Andy Haldane talking over the weekend about the BOE considering negative rates. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it was those comments that certainly did send the pound moving lower. It is one of the underperformers in G10 today, along with the yen, which kind of speaks to the risk on, as does the rally in commodity currencies like the Norwegian krone and the Aussie dollar. But that seems to be mainly driven by the fact that we're seeing a rally in oil. WTI above $30, above 31 in fact, for the first time in 2 months, up 5.6%. Brent at 33.83, up 4%. It's all about the American output cuts that are stealing the focus now, Roger.
Right, let's go on to our top stories then. So AstraZeneca's aiming to make 30 million doses of a vaccine by September, and it's committed to delivering 100 million doses this year. The UK will be the first country to get access to this vaccine if it's successful. It's being developed at Oxford University, and Business Secretary Alok Sharma says it's getting over £65 million of funding.
The US is ramping up its criticism of China over the coronavirus, with a senior aide to President Trump suggesting Beijing sent airline passengers around the world to spread the infection. Trade advisor Peter Navarro told ABC China hid behind the World Health Organization while sending people to infect other countries. Navarro's comments echo those of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's accused China of a cover-up.
Meanwhile, Asian tech stocks are rattled on Monday after the US announced rules aimed at curbing chip supplies to Huawei Technologies. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The U.S. said it would require licenses for American technology to be used by Huawei. Not only Huawei, but also its 114 subsidiaries. Investors fear it will bring immediate Chinese retaliation. That sent share prices of companies in Huawei's supply chain tumbling. Firms taking a hit include TSMC, SK Hynix, and Sunny Optical. The Nikkei Asian Review reports TSMC has stopped taking new orders from Huawei. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And Roger, of course, as we discussed earlier in the show, China's facing an angry world looking for virus answers at a key World Health Organization meeting in Geneva today. Now, global central banks are warning the recovery from the coronavirus may take years. Fed Chair Jerome Powell told CBS he expects any U.S. rebound to stretch up to the end of next year, while the Bank of England says it's urgently examining unconventional policy measures as the UK slump deepens. Policymakers agree the virus will trigger a global slump, but expect a rebound fueled by massive stimulus.
And turning to airlines, Ryanair's forecast a loss of more than €200 million in the first quarter, but taking a bullish stance. The discount carrier also said the loss will be smaller than expected in the second quarter. Meanwhile, Bloomberg's reporting that Emirates may slash around 30,000 positions as it looks to cut costs to weather the virus crisis. Well, for more on all this, we're joined by Bloomberg's airlines reporter, Siddharth Phillip. Siddharth, good morning to you. Now, take us through, first of all, these Ryanair numbers. How is the cash burn coming down?
Morning, Roger. So Ryanair is looking at reducing its cash burn by they've taken in some of the furlough schemes across the government, and they've also looked at boosting liquidity with a £600 million loan from the UK government. And essentially, they're looking at reducing their cash burn as they get into July 1st, when they expect to resume flying.
Okay, so they expect to resume flying on July 1st, but there is the sort of sense that they're digging in for a slow recovery, Sid. Do they see many opportunities in the marketplace next year then?
Sure. So they're talking about a slow ramp up to demand. They are talking about how they are seeing some demand for people looking at late summer vacations in August and September to get some sun before they go back to school. And they are looking at slowly ramping up capacity as they get into the winter season, which is typically slower for carriers in Europe, and then getting back to much better flying by March 21.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, we heard from Michael O'Leary, of course, just about 40 minutes ago here on this programme, that he's very sceptical about the second wave of the virus and what that might do, describing it, in fact, to us as a medical myth, quote unquote. So they are, as we've all said, very bullish on this, perhaps unsurprisingly. But Sid, what about Emirates? Because that's really interesting. These planned job cuts that we're reporting, a bit of a Bloomberg scoop on that. So what do we know?
Yeah, so what we understand is that Emirates is considering slashing about 30,000 jobs, and that's among the deepest cuts yet in the global aviation industry. And essentially it's because Emirates is an all long-haul carrier, and IATA expects long-haul to take the longest to recover. So they're trying to shrink their payroll, which is they have about 100,000 employees, and they're trying to reduce costs, and they're also sort of expecting a longer downturn.
Siddharth Philip, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. And just taking a look at Ryanair shares, actually what we've seen is green on the screen for them. They are up 4.5% in trading today. Let's get to the world news now with Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira, and thank you. Several European countries are easing their lockdown rules today. Restaurants, bars and beaches are reopening in Italy weeks earlier than planned, with the Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte calling it a calculated risk. Small shops have also opened in most of Spain, while Greece allowed people to visit churches from yesterday. Meanwhile, Belgium is slowly getting back to normal after almost 2 months of lockdown. Shops, museums, zoos and hairdressers are opening their doors with precautions, but most importantly, schools are starting. Bloomberg's Aoife White reports.
But not everyone is going back. Only selected grades, and schools don't have to open if they can't manage social distancing. Classes are split up, desks spaced out, and teachers are masked. Schools can choose shorter days or just a few days a week. Children under 6 are still staying home. We're still not fully back to normal. Aoife White, Brussels, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
New Zealand's plan to eliminate the coronavirus entirely may bring dividends as it begins to rebuild its economy and promote itself as a safe haven for global business. Bloomberg's Matthew Brockett has more.
New Zealand appears to have succeeded in stamping out the virus, reporting just 2 new cases in the past week. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern claims this gives the country a safe haven strategic advantage that will help it to recover faster. While that remains to be seen, there are some encouraging signs. Microsoft last month announced plans to open a data centre in New Zealand. In Wellington, Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And professional sports made a comeback this weekend for the first time since the coronavirus lockdown. Bloomberg's Stefan Nicola has more on Germany's Football League restarting.
Officials had introduced many hygiene rules, from testing players and banning fans from stadiums to forcing coaches to wear masks. It was an eerie experience watching this on TV. You could hear every pass, every tackle echo through the arenas. Players needed 30 minutes to adjust until Dortmund's Erling Haaland scored the first post-lockdown goal against rivals Schalke. It remains to be seen how much interest the competition can generate. In Berlin, Germany, Stefan Nicola, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, now it's interesting about the way that Germany is beginning to go back to football. There's some moves towards that here in the UK, as we're now going to hear from William Eslam, particularly in terms of training in the Premier League.
Premier League clubs will meet this morning to vote on whether to allow players back to training. At least 14 must be in favour of the new medical protocols relating to the coronavirus for the motion to pass. If clubs agree, players could return to training tomorrow. Clubs in League One will hold further talks today on whether to resume their season or not. On Friday, clubs in League Two voted to end their campaign early due to the coronavirus pandemic. Portsmouth, Sunderland, Ipswich, Peterborough, Oxford and Fleetwood are against voiding the season or using points per game to decide the final table. And Nice will host the resumption of racing in Ireland with a behind closed door meeting on the 8th of June. The following weekend, the Curragh will host the 2,000 guineas on the Friday, with the 1,000 guineas the following day.
That's your European sport. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Mobeen Tahir, Associate Director of Research at Wisdom Tree, joins us to talk through the markets. And it is a risk-on day. The Stock 600 in Europe up 1.6%. Global equities had a weekly loss last week, and there's been quite a bit of unsettling news over the weekend, not least in terms of US-China relations. But US futures firmly on the front foot, up more than 1%. This is Bloomberg.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community. Support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
No company wants to be involved in an international dispute. But when disagreements arise, you need expertise at your side. Take a closer look at ICDR, the International Center for Dispute Resolution. Backed by the longevity and strength of the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of cross-border dispute resolution services, handling more cases than any other institution. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, working with government and National Rail, TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're in this together and you have a vital part to play. Continue working from home if you can. Avoid public transport to allow those that must use it to do so safely. Walk or cycle to work if you can. We're adding cycleways and widening pavements to help. If you must travel, travel off-peak, especially in the mornings. For those who must use public transport, it is now very different. Follow national social distancing measures of 2 meters wherever possible. Wear a face covering over your nose and mouth and wash your hands before and after travel. Our services are regularly cleaned with hospital-grade antiviral disinfectant for everyone's safety. And we're providing hand sanitizer across the public transport network to help reduce the spread of the virus. Thank you for your help. Search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Just this wall and that one to do, Dave, and then we're done. Whoop! Oh, no!
Hello, Steve the Sparky.
Pass us that roof tile, Chris.
Yep, sure.
I'll be fun. Oh, no. Saved by the gutter. Built to rough it with contractors. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung Rugged range.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Add
wristbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And the risk-on mood that we saw earlier in Asia, very much in the European markets now, as we are now 3/4 of an hour into the open. The Stock 600 up 1.8%, FTSE's up 2.08%, CAC up 2.14%, the DAX up 2.5%, and the IBEX up 1.7%. So that risk-on mood definitely going through there. And also, we're seeing it in US futures as well. The S&P 500 is up 1.4% futures at the moment. NASDAQ very similar. Also, the big movement we've seen in the last 24 hours really has been in terms of oil. The WTI is over $30 a barrel, first time in a couple of months. Now it's 31.06, that's up 5.5%. Brent is also up 3.8%, 33.75. In terms of bonds, US 10-year treasuries, very little movement around, all hovering around the 0.64 handle this morning. And also keeping an eye on cable, the pound right now down a little bit, actually gone back to virtually no movement. It certainly made up the losses it had after those comments from Andy Haldane about potentially negative rates in the UK. Currently on cable 1.21. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, thank you. Germany has recorded a small increase in cases, though the daily death toll from coronavirus has fallen. There were 617 new cases this morning, bringing the total to just under 176,400. Meanwhile, several European countries are easing their lockdown rules today. The UK, Italy and Spain all recorded their lowest death tolls since March over the weekend. Now, Ireland is taking its first steps out of the coronavirus lockdown as part of its 5-phase exit plan. Some shops will be allowed to reopen today and outdoor work can be resumed. People will also be able to meet outdoors in groups of 4 as long as they stick to social distancing rules. And finally, here in the UK, they're hoping to develop a new weapon against the pandemic, coronavirus sniffing dogs. A £500,000 programme will back clinical trials to train dogs to see if they can spot the virus before symptoms even appear. For the initial phase, NHS staff in London hospitals will train 6 dogs to sniff odour samples from the infected and from the uninfected. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, bet you loved that story.
I absolutely love that story. Now, I was just having a look at some of the dogs' names, and one of the dogs' names is Digby, one is Storm, and I thought they were quite nice names. But these dogs are super intelligent dogs, so they've already been trained to detect odours of certain cancers, malaria, Parkinson's disease. So this is an interesting step that we're taking here in the UK.
Frontline NHS dogs will be clapping.
Indeed, Roger.
All right, let's get back to the markets then with our guest for the hour, Mobeen Tahir, Associate Director of Research at Wisdom Tree, joining us down the line. Mobeen, really great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've been commenting through the show that we're seeing quite a risk-on tone to markets today, despite really the lack of any good news over the weekend, apart from if you want to take a positive stance on the reopening of some economies and put the risk of second waves aside. We've been hearing from people for a long time, look, investors are looking through the bad data, they're looking through earnings, they're looking to stimulus on the other side. The question, I guess, is where do you want to put your money to get the best out of that stimulus? All kinds of suggestions. There's a story about it on the Bloomberg. Some people looking at China high yield. Lots of people, of course, are banging the credit drum in the US. Some even favouring emerging markets or inflation risk. Where would you want to put your money to get the best bang for your buck out of the global stimulus measures?
Sure. Thank you. At Wisdom Tree, we believe there are three main avenues of opportunity for investors today, given where we are in terms of the economic recovery and the forecast coming ahead. First of all, if you think about gold presents a strong case for investors looking to hedge the uncertainty ahead this year. We know that there's still a lot of uncertainty this year with regards to the economic recovery. And also, gold is a good hedge against a potential pickup in inflation, which might manifest next year, according to some forecasts and expectations. Equally, if some investors are looking to play the cyclical economic recovery, then cyclical commodities such as oil and industrial metals are becoming increasingly appealing because investors are eyeing the U-shaped recovery, and industrial metals, for example, haven't quite priced that in the way equities have. And equally, number three is for equity investors in particular. We believe that equity investors should continue to seek out thematic investment opportunities emanating largely from technology such as cloud computing, clean energy, artificial intelligence, those sorts of themes. They've been doing really well through the crisis, and in the long run, they drive innovation, they drive growth, and that's why markets keep betting on them.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that point you're making about stocks there, because it's interesting, that difference between growth stocks, value stocks, the MSCI World Growth Index approaching its February highs, risk on sentiment return, but the MSCI World Value Index isn't taking off as decisively. Should one make that kind of distinction?
Yeah, look, to me, the whole story with stocks at this point in time boils down to cash flow, most importantly. Look at the businesses that are doing well during the current crisis. They've got good cash flow. And that's something that we can assess very, very logically, very obviously, because think about businesses which are not making money, all the airlines, the leisure industry, and so forth. But compare that to things in the technology sector, the companies which are providing communication infrastructure, companies which are providing entertainment at home or infrastructure to enable people to work efficiently and effectively from home. All of these things are in demand. They're still doing well. So the bottom line is, the most important thing is cash flow. And if the cash flow is good, then markets are expecting those companies to survive the current crisis, not have to rely on government and central bank support just for their survival. And of course, in the long run, as I was saying, technology drives innovation, it drives new demand, and that's why markets are always so excited about technology to lead that going forward.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a little bit, Mobeen, about the opportunities you see in fixed income, specifically with the whole narrative of negative rates. There's two views that have kind of come out over the weekend. JP Morgan Asset Management saying we're probably not going to see negative rates from the Fed actually for 3 or 4 years, whereas you've got Michael Gappen over at Barclays saying the US bond market may be poised for a swift, dramatic repricing. And the reason he says that is there's a risk that no one's there to turn the lights on when businesses reopen because emergency stimulus is not getting out fast enough to keep many of those businesses afloat. He says once the prospect of a sustained downturn factors into the market's thinking, the 10-year Treasury rate could plummet toward or below zero and long-term inflation break-evens would collapse. Where do you sit in that negative rate debate in terms of the Fed?
Well, with regards to negative rates, there are two things which are important to think about. One is the efficacy of negative rates to spur the market, and second is can they induce growth? So there are two different debates, and they are very difficult debates. So it's important to recognize that in Europe, in Japan, the case study has been a difficult one. Even with negative rates, have we seen a large amount of growth? Maybe not so much. So that's why we see that in the U.S. there's this reluctance or hesitation from the Fed to suggest that they will be moving towards negative rates. And but it all boils down to this: look, there will still be a need for stimulus from central banks, particularly in the U.S. and around the world. And with the rates being so low, chances are they will employ other measures of accommodative monetary policy, such as asset purchases, and continuing to keep rates low with forward guidance, etc. So it is expected.
So Mobeen, if I can just interrupt you there. So are you actually saying you think they will have negative rates or not, do you think, in the end? What's your guess?
If the question is with regards to the U.S., we expect rates to definitely stay low for quite some time. Whether or not they will be negative is another question. But for now, we expect policy to remain very accommodative. We've seen that that the Fed has shown that willingness and preparedness to keep policy very accommodative, and that will keep rates low for sure.
The cyclical commodity story that you were talking about, Mobeen, just briefly, do you think that has much further to run, particularly with regard to oil?
Sure. So if you think about where oil prices are today, despite the recovery in the last couple of weeks or so, around February time, we were talking $65 per barrel for both Brent and WTI, and of course we're not going to be back at those levels where we were in February anytime soon, because what happened to oil markets was a double shock essentially.
All right.
Demand crashed, and equally there was a supply glut because of price was...
Mobeen, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Mobeen Tahir, the Associate Director of Research at Wisdom Tree, joining us on the line. You're listening to Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Working with government and National Rail, TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're in this together and you have a vital part to play. Continue working from home if you can. Avoid public transport to allow those that must use it to do so safely. Walk or cycle to work if you can. We're adding cycleways and widening pavements to help. If you must travel, travel off-peak, especially in the mornings. For those who must use public transport, it is now very different. Follow national social distancing measures of 2 meters wherever possible. Wear a face covering over your nose and mouth and wash your hands before and after travel. Our services are regularly cleaned with hospital-grade antiviral disinfectant for everyone's safety, and we're providing hand sanitizer across the public transport network to help reduce the spread of the virus. Thank you for your help. Search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepke.
And good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
So I guess my main question, Matt, for our guests, I think, this morning and for you, is why European equity markets are going up. We're up by almost 2% on the US Stock 600, despite, obviously, the worries about how quickly the UK and Europe can open up, the risks of a second wave of the virus. And really the same thing goes in the United States after the Fed warnings last week. And yet, I look at my terminal this morning, S&P 500 E-mini futures up by 1.5%.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think the virus has been priced in, what if the U.S.-China trade relationship sours? I mean, you've got Peter Navarro saying that China was seeding the West with the coronavirus. That seems that they seem unlikely to stay friends for much longer. And even more generally, you know, people bringing supply chains back. Maybe there's a turnaround in globalization. There's a lot more to price in, basically, than just the coronavirus issues. What the assets that I think are the moves that I think are weird in asset prices today is, and I'm hoping a guest will be able to explain this to us. We see gold rising once again and up to I think a 7-year record, 1762, at the same time as copper and steel are rising. I mean, as bonds are falling, you know, safe haven plays are down today, and yet investors are buying gold. Maybe that's a currency issue. I don't know, but there's really interesting market moves today.
Yeah, certainly a tug of war when it comes to ideas in the markets. WTI crude futures, as you point out, up 5.7% for WTI benchmark at $31.12. So that's the first time we're over $30 a barrel in a couple of months. Also, interestingly, I think in the bond markets for Europe is that we dropped 7 basis points for Italian BTP yields at 179, and we're going to get another big auction this week of inflation-linked Italian bonds after, of course, the debt sales last week went well. And so there's also a tension here, isn't there, about the strength of Europe given the virus and the economic situation and what's going on in Italy.
Yeah, I mean, $30 a barrel is still going to hurt inflation indexes, and airlines that are hedged are still getting killed at $30 a barrel. So, but it's an amazing comeback from negative $37 a barrel, that's for sure. Let's get over right now to our guest and talk about some of these things. Banu Buweja, chief strategist at UBS Investment Bank, was with us on Bloomberg Television earlier and joins us now on Bloomberg Radio. Banu, first off, on the very short term, on just today's moves, what do you make of the optimism behind European equity indexes? We see it being played out in U.S. futures are up as well. And then risk assets like commodities are pretty much up across the board. Everything from the oils to the metals to the ags, all up today. Why?
Look, I think the market is trading stimulus. The market is trading the infection rate. And more importantly, and perhaps more recently, the market has begun trading higher oil. That's the reason you see indices, which are energy heavy like FTSE, doing extremely well. That has lifted the entire commodity complex. So it's a plethora of reasons coming together. The market's expecting a reasonably large stimulus from China. So going into the NPC later this week, that's another factor that's buoying commodities and therefore helping the value trade. But in the main, the market's saying we are going to trade reopening. We're going to trade the amount of stimulus that is being promised by the Fed, being promised by the BOE, being promised by the PBOC. What they're not trading at this minute, and I think that that's probably a mistake, what they're not trading is what that reopening looks like. I think the market's kind of thinking
of this in digital terms, 0 or 1, what they're not thinking about is even when you do reopen, what does demand actually look like? What do earnings actually look like? I actually think it's quite instructive to look at some of the sort of best-in-class economies in terms of their healthcare systems that caught the virus early on and responded and managed to keep the entire curve quite low. So I'm thinking Australia, New Zealand, Korea, till recently in Hong Kong. I think these give you the best cases in terms of how strong demand can be. And our evidence lab data at UBS tells you that even for these economies, demand is down about 40% in the year. For economies that have taken much longer to come to terms with the virus in terms of their governance or in terms of the science of the virus, the demand hit is going to be much higher. So I think Powell is onto something when he says that this is going to take a while to come back. This is not just a manufacturing or a construction hit. It's a hit in services, and that's where you could see balance sheet issues, not just income statement issues, come up.
Yeah, and none of the examples of the sort of best case scenarios in Europe would be my question. And, mentioning Italian BTPs earlier this morning, the spread between Italian BTPs and German Bund yields is narrowing some 5 basis points this morning. But there is a persistent question, isn't there, as Europe reopens about the strength of the rebound here and actually whether Europe is now positioned going forwards to deal with at least the health crisis, were there to be a second wave, for example?
I think that's a question that's going to be with us for Europe and for other economies. You make a good point in Italy. I think Italian debt's not going to come under a major cloud this year because that's just the size of the PEPP program, which even the GCC from Germany has not as yet put a major question to. I think the big issues will emerge next year. Hopefully, at that time, we are through the virus, either because of a vaccine or because the virus has burnt itself out. At that time, there's no need for an emergency program, but Italy would be at public debt, which is at about, close to 160 to 175% of GDP, depending on how much it contracts this year. How do we absorb that supply, and can, at that time, the ECB go back to sort of the issuer limits and the capital key limits that it needs to stick to, or can it persist in being quite far away from where the GCC wants it to be? That's going to be the key question. So I think 2021 is going to be quite an interesting year for Italy. I don't think that's going to be a problem this year. But what's going to be a problem this year already for Europe is the fact that European markets derive a lot of their income from what goes on in the rest of the world, particularly emerging markets. And unlike 2009, when you could argue that EM had a very good crisis, it's very difficult to argue this time that that's happening because as you have seen in Brazil, India, Mexico, the number of cases is rising, and we don't know if we are anywhere close to halfway point as yet. And this is despite, in some cases, very strong, very severe lockdowns. So that story is getting worse, and that's going to mean that the demand for European companies is going to be that much more lackluster. We were speaking on the television head earlier with Matt on how the discount for the US, or I should say the discount for Europe and emerging markets relative to the US, is not going to be a mean reverting series, both because of the nature of investment, the nature of companies in the US, and also because Europe is much more dependent on emerging markets, which are not having a good crisis.
On the other hand, Europe has this amazing survival mechanism. I mean, you're talking about Italy with 160, 175% of debt to GDP, and the GCC had ruled against quantitative easing, and it all seems like a disaster that could blow up, and yet we all know that it won't, right? It'll just sort of limps along, and little answers are given here and there at their meetings, their conferences, and it's just, emergency measures that were meant to stay in place for only a few months stay pretty much forever. It's so Europe. What do you think about value stocks right now, Banu? We were talking about mean reversion there as well, and growth stocks have just killed it over value stocks for well over a decade, and especially in the last month of trading. That bear market rally that we saw was all, the growth stocks, and Is there ever a time when value stocks are going to come back? Is the Benjamin Graham model of investing seen its day?
I think there is a time. Look, I personally think the definition of value itself could change, and the weight of energy, the weight of sort of deep industrials, the weight of public sector financials in these sectors is automatically likely to go down, and the sectoral composition of value is going to shift over time. And as that happens, I think almost by construction, value should find a bottom, right? But value as we know it, value as we remember it, I think it's hard to expect mean reversion in that. Let's say this in English. The way you expect mean reversion in value is you expecting mean reversion in the nature of expenditure, right? That more and more of us don't consume and invest as we are in intellectual property, in the digital space, but we go back to consuming in the material space, whether that's malls or that's construction or that's commodities, that our intensity of consumption and investment for stuff increases and falls. That's actually quite difficult because this is a change that's been going on across the world. We spoke about Italy earlier. What is the one investment that Italian banks have made? It's digitization. So it's very difficult. And by the way, if I could oversimplify a bit, the father of the value trade is China. Because what you need for the value trade to do well is higher commodities, higher inflation expectations, a weaker dollar, all of which emanate from China, including the weaker dollar. But that is difficult because China itself, if there's one thing that's changing in China, and there are several, but if there's one thing that's changing in China faster than any other, it's the nature of investment and the nature of consumption changing. China is also moving away from infrastructure of roads and houses towards infrastructure and services. And that's why I think it's a little bit difficult for the value trade to come back quickly.
Okay, interesting. That's a really good point on China. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Banu Bawejo, who's Chief Strategist at UBS Investment Bank. Well, let's turn to Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans now, who's standing by with all the latest in global news. Of course, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak is speaking later in the UK, and you start with UK news. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning. Yes, and thank you. So we'll start here in the UK, as you said, where the government has promised an extra £84 million to develop a coronavirus vaccine. The additional funding will support teams at Oxford University and Imperial College London trying to find a treatment for COVID-19. The Business Secretary, Alok Sharma, says the money will also go towards mass production of the vaccine if trials are indeed successful.
The first clinical trial of the Oxford vaccine is progressing well, with all phase 1 participants having received their vaccine dose on schedule earlier this week. The speed at which Oxford University has designed and organised these complex trials is genuinely unprecedented.
It comes as AstraZeneca has said it will make as many as 30 million doses of the coronavirus vaccine available to the UK by September. European countries are starting to reopen their economies while trying to monitor the coronavirus until a vaccine can be found. Italy's shops, bars, restaurants and barbers will be allowed to reopen on a regional basis from later today. Spain is also entering a first phase of opening, which will allow groups of up to 10 people to meet, with bars and restaurants operating outside spaces. And the first meeting of the World Health Organization's governing body since COVID-19 appeared is starting later in Geneva. Bloomberg's Karen Lee has more on the challenges China is set to face.
With China set to be pressed on two of its most sensitive issues, its initial handling of the virus and the status of Taiwan's participation. The U.S. has launched a daily barrage of attacks on China, including suggesting the disease escaped from a laboratory in Wuhan. The EU and major Chinese trading partner Australia are set to play a key role pushing for a probe into the virus's origin. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit hud.gov/fairhousing. That's hud.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. Message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Who's in your corner? At Commonwealth Financial Network, our advisors would say we are. Our supportive environment lets you be true to yourself, and our culture of accountability means we don't just ask for your feedback. We act on it, so we can deliver the solutions you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Ready to discover the difference? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Youssef Kamel El-Din.
Speculators betting that Saudi Arabia will be forced to abandon its currency peg are skating on thinner ice. 12 month forward contracts on the real have retreated from recent highs that mirrored the oil price plunge. Goldman Sachs argues that a devaluation would be near-term beneficial only if the magnitude of that devaluation is very large. Let's get more on this with Farouk Sousa. He's the Vice President for MENA Economics Research at Goldman Sachs Group. It does make sense, but under very specific circumstances.
Only if the devaluation is very large, like you said. We think that the only way a devaluation can actually help the fiscal or the external outlook is by suppressing domestic demand very significantly through like an income effect, basically making people a lot poorer. And the only way you're going to have a magnitude big enough to reduce imports in a country like Saudi Arabia, where not very much is produced locally, is by devaluing something like maybe anywhere between 50 and 80%. We probably think at the higher end of that range. And we think that's going to have a pretty big impact on domestic monetary stability, on the credibility of monetary policy, on investment going forward, and so on. So the costs are really, really large associated with that kind of magnitude of devaluation, which makes it relatively unlikely in our view.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Danny Berger with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Stock markets opening on an optimistic note as we start the week. That's despite some weaker economic data releases that we've gotten over the past few days. U.S. futures are up nearly 2%. That's going to be their highest level since May 11th. Likewise, European equities heading higher as well, more than 2% as of this morning. Every single sector is higher. Leading the way are resources and oil and gas. Shouldn't be a surprise here, considering that oil itself is doing better, pushing above $30 a barrel for both Brent and crude. That's going to be the first time it's done that since March. Commodities in general are pushing higher. Maybe the market here taking some encouragement from signs that businesses are finally starting to reopen. In the currency space, really muted moves this morning. Dollar basically not giving us any direction. Same with the pound. However, if it clocks another decline, it's going to be its sixth straight session. The Bank of England perhaps looking at unconventional policies, including negative interest rates, so that's taking a hit to cable there. Euro dollar also just lower by 70 bips. Again, not much movement. A lot of movement in gold markets, though, trading around $1,762. It's going to be near the highest in 7 years. We've seen trade tensions between the U.S. and China flare up. That's certainly a trade that historically has favored gold. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Guerin returns with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Good morning, Danny, and thank you. Let's start here in the UK, where a new points-based immigration system could move a step closer today as lawmakers discuss legislation in Parliament. The European Union withdrawal bill would end freedom of movement and introduce new rules for who can come and live in Britain. Home Secretary Priti Patel says a new system promotes a high-skill economy, but critics say the coronavirus pandemic has changed public attitudes towards those considered unskilled. Now, in Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro is holding back from replacing his health minister. Instead of announcing a replacement, he joined supporters who marched in front of the presidential palace as the coronavirus crisis deepens. Brazil has over 241,000 cases, the fourth highest in the world. And a game-worn pair of Nike trainers from Michael Jordan's glory days have gone for a record. The Air Jordan 1s were custom-made for Jordan in the colors of the Chicago Bulls, and bidding was expected to reach $150,000. 7 days into the online auction at Sotheby's, the shoes went for $560,000. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Eliza Martinuzzi, who's writing about how the coronavirus is affecting gender parity. And you're looking, Eliza, not at the health issues, right? Because we know the coronavirus overwhelmingly hits men harder. In terms of deaths, at least. But you're looking at the economic fallout. It's hurting women. This crisis is hurting women much harder than men in terms of job losses, lower incomes, etc.
Different pockets of society differently. I looked at the economic fallout, and the early indications are, if you take a look at the numbers in the US, for example, 55% of the jobs that were lost in April were held by women, and in some states that figure was as high as 67%, and that trend was also seen similarly in Canada. And what you're seeing is that entire industries that rely predominantly on a female workforce, such as the leisure, the hospitality, and the retail industry, being brought to a halt across the world. What is also important, though, is to bear in mind that what we've seen in previous crises is that it tends to take longer for women sometimes to get back into the workforce. And in part, that reflects the fact that they tend to take on more of the household responsibilities, which, of course, this time around also include homeschooling, with something in the order of 70% of the of children being schooled from home at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why the issue around schooling is so important. But look, it's not just leisure and hospitality; it's also the caring and the nursing professions where women, are on the front lines. Do you think it's actually? Can something be done about it, though? Because it was the same time last time around in the financial crisis, women were hit harder, but then sometimes implementing public policy responses to this have been very sluggish.
Yes, I think it's important to see, that there are certain, a number of opportunities that present themselves at this juncture. I mean, you mentioned the healthcare sector. Of course, women there too hold a large majority of the job, both in healthcare and in long-term care. And there, particularly in countries where compensation when pay has fallen behind, you have an opportunity there for governments to rectify that. But there are also, many other ways in which both companies, investors, and government can be trying to narrow the gender gap. The government, quite rightly, up until now, have been handing out cash, in the way of loans and guaranteed funding, mainly to put out, to fund companies, from day to day. But now that they have more time to think about what next, they can think about tying sustainability goals, for example, to some of those financing. So, for example, they could tie them to encouraging companies to have a greater female representation in leadership. You could tie that to, encouraging companies to improve the conditions of, some of their most precarious workers, such as their temporary staff and their freelancers, which again, oftentimes tend to be women.
Yeah, or even the bonus, for example, that is being discussed in the UK for frontline healthcare workers that has not been agreed.
Absolutely, and companies could be, taking on board what we've seen in the last few months, which is, more flexible working arrangements and trying to make those more permanent, which oftentimes is a way to help women progress in their careers. So I think it's a moment in which we've obviously had an enormous economic and financial fallout. Now that we have a bit more breathing room, there's time to think about how we try and tackle the gender gap.
I just want to, so during the great financial crisis, I'm not sure if I misheard you, Caroline, but men were hit far harder than women during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. At least in the U.S., men lost 6 million jobs compared to job losses of 2.7 million for women. And that's been reversed here, right, Elisa? So men were the predominant job losers in the financial crisis, and now we're seeing it with much higher job loss figures that women are
absolutely. But I think we need to sort of take into account the longer term implications of those job losses and how quickly those markets, those labour forces bounced back. And it does appear that in some instances women took longer to return to the workforce. And of course, this time around, you might have combination of both more women losing jobs and if they are to take longer to come back into the workforce, you could see that gender gap widening.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also in things like, the longer term labour participation rate, the number of women in the workforce overall and how quickly that bounces back. But yes, I take your point, Matt, that the immediate job losses are very. Well, we have the stats for the US. 6 million jobs were lost by men, 2.7 million were lost by women until 2010. And then 5.5 million jobs were regained by men. 3.6 million jobs were regained by women between 2010 and 2014. So you had even really growth in the female participation in the labor force then. The question is, will the bounce back be different this time, right? I mean, there was a lot of hope for a V-shaped recovery and a quicker bounce, for example, as restaurants reopen, as flights start up again. Is that going to help? Lisa?
Well, the one thing to also take into consideration is that we've got a shift to technology that will only be accelerated by this crisis, and a shift to digitalization. And that, of course, will make some jobs obsolete. And again, a lot of these are going to fall into categories where women held the predominant labor force. For example, retail. I mean, the high streets will potentially look very different. So after the crisis, so you have a longer.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year. And be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
Typical Danny. Imagine trying to unwind at a spa weekend and you wind up getting your mud pack all over your fave personalised dressing gown. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Airbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Prime Minister had encouraged those who could return to work to do so, but we didn't have the notice around the public transport system and the buses and trams, etc. So it was a frustrating few days, I think it's got to be said. What we've seen over the last week is the numbers on the roads, on the buses, on the trams and trains slowly increasing, and that has continued more so this morning. Numbers on the roads, on the buses, on the trams and trains slowly increasing, and that has continued more so this morning.
Okay, is that a good thing in your view? And also, has the government agreed to any of your demands that you laid out in your article on Saturday? So you wanted more funding for public transport so that you could have social distancing more in big regional metropolitan areas, and also more money for councils, for example, to battle homelessness.
Yeah, so the government hasn't yet given me a call this morning to promise me all of those things, but I'm here by the phone. Obviously, London Transport had a major funding package last week. And the question I asked in the article was, well, where was the deal for Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle? So we haven't had one yet. And it can't be right that we're encouraging people back to work, but we're not putting on the public transport to allow them safely to travel to work. And you're right, we have a situation where councils in the north of England, where there are a higher number of cases, are facing the biggest costs. But we haven't yet had the funding from the government to cope with that, particularly on homelessness. We had 800 people in Greater Manchester in hotels or in apartments. We brought everybody inside at the start of the crisis, and the government encouraged us to do that, and we agree with them about that. But we haven't now got the funding we need to ensure that there's an onward destination for those people, so that we can safely move them onto a permanent location. So it's these issues, Caroline, that are on our mind this morning, and I'm not making politics out of this. You know, I've got to speak up to the area I represent, and we're calling on the government to listen to what we're saying, so we can get back to a spirit of working together.
Okay, why do you think the government has not funded public transport in your region in the way that TfL negotiated, and no doubt the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, also a Labour mayor? Why do you think the North was not included?
I mean, it's just a London-centric culture, isn't it? I mean, I worked in Westminster the best part of 20 years and was a government minister, so I've seen it, and it's not just this current government, it's true under all governments, and governments of the left as well as the right. We have a thing called COBRA here, so this is obviously the national emergency decision-making body. The Mayor of London is on it, but no mayor from any other city is on it. So it's kind of the way the system here has always worked. It hears the voice of London, but it doesn't really listen in the same way to other parts of the English regions. And bear in mind, this is a government, the Johnson government, that was elected on votes in the North, that has been promising to level up. It's just been disappointing to us to see how quickly they've gone back into that London-centric mode when the crisis began.
Well, my other question, I suppose, then is why, I mean, for another issue that you've mentioned is talking about schools reopening. Why do you think that schools reopening looks different in different places in the north in particular? I mean, surely one could argue that there should actually be the same high standards across the UK, you know, the idea of perhaps bubbles of pupils and so on. Why should school reopening, be different in the north?
Because the R number is higher in the north than it is in the south. So if you look at the northeast, the number that obviously gives us an indication of the rate of infection is 0.8, and it's 0.4 in London. So clearly there's a different level of risk between those two places. And again, this is where we kind of hit a bit of difficulty with the government. They gave a sort of fixed date, 1st of June, schools should come back. You know, if you're sitting in the northeast and you're kind of looking at the local situation and seeing the number of people in hospital, you might make a different calculation about the wisdom of that firm date, and a bit more flexibility. I would say should have been allowed, so that different areas could have just come to different judgments. We all want to see the kids back in school as quickly as possible, but it obviously has to be as safely as possible as well. And obviously, in different parts of the country, that question will look different given that variation in the R number.
Okay, you've talked about the north being treated differently, but the whole of the UK is getting the same in terms of the furlough support, the loan and grants to businesses, and surely then also none of the UK equally has the track and trace system that we need to have up and running. So we're all facing the same situation there. The funding is the same across the UK.
Well, yes, I mean, many of the things the government has put in place have been great. I mean, there's the things that I was calling for and others too, and so credit to them for that. You know, the furlough scheme particularly, I think will really help us preserve jobs and businesses and bring the economy back quicker. So, and the speed with which they've implemented that, I think, is impressive. But here's the but. We have a situation where the virus is most prevalent in the poorest communities. And sadly, they are overrepresented in the north of England. And consequently, the costs that we are facing in the north are higher than other places elsewhere. So simply to cut up the cake on an even share according to population, well, that doesn't end up then giving you the funding where the need is greatest. And, you know, that I think is reasonable for us to make that point to a government that claimed it wanted to look after the north of England. Well, I'm saying, well, come on then, let's do that together and get the money where it is most needed. Because on that issue, like homelessness, obviously we've got higher levels of homelessness here than you have in, let's say, some parts of East Anglia or the southwest. And our councils need that funding to deal with that very challenging situation.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Andy Burnham. Thank you for joining me this morning to give us a picture of what's happening outside of London and the South East. The Labour Mayor of Greater Manchester joining us. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. We're live from London. Matt, you're with us and you've got the latest in terms of the markets this morning.
Yeah, and really incredible gains here across equity indexes to kick off the week. We're looking at more than 2% gains on the OMX, the AEX, the IBEX, the DAX, the CAC, the FTSE, the Eurostoxx 50 benchmark. So really 2% plus gains everywhere. The DAX is up right now 300 points, almost 3% to 10,764. So clawing back some of it, what it lost the last 3 weeks in a row. We saw equity indexes lose out. We do see U.S. futures rising as well, and those numbers continue to move higher throughout the session. So we were looking at less than 1% gains just at the top of the hour, and now we're looking at 1.5% gains for all the three major indexes, future contracts on the three major indexes. Dow and S&P futures up more than 1.5% right now. NASDAQ 100 E-minis up just about 1%. We see gains across all of the, pretty much all commodities here. Only coffee and wheat are down that I see on my main dashboard, but crude is the big driver. NYMEX WTI up back over $30 a barrel at $30.95. It's a 5% gain. We see gains in gold to a 7-year high, up more than 1% to $1,762 a troy ounce, but also gains in other, copper and steel are rising. And then we see big gains today in sugar as well as some of the ags. As I said, aside from coffee, which is down a bit, and wheat. So really a risk on for the markets today as we see bonds down in price. And that's a data check. And sorry, are you going to bring in Leanne?
I was in a minute.
I had missed her voice.
Yes, I just wanted to mention one red headline that is on the Bloomberg terminal that I think will be of interest to our listeners. So let me drop that in before we get to Leanne, because the Hang Seng says that dual class shares and secondary listings will be eligible. This, of course, is the shake-up of the Hang Seng. It says that the changes will be effective from August 2020 as part of the index review. So that was the red headline on the Bloomberg terminal to bring to you just ahead of Bloomberg's Leanne Goins, who's got all the latest in global news. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning and thank you. Let's start here in the UK, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is warning of a long battle against coronavirus. It comes as the government is trying to persuade people to return to work and school as the economy gets back on its feet. A report by The Sun on Sunday said Johnson told Conservative lawmakers he wants a return to near normal in July. Meanwhile, several European countries are easing their lockdown rules today. Restaurants, bars and beaches are reopening in Italy weeks earlier than planned, with the Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte calling it a calculated risk. Small shops have also opened in most of Spain, while Greece allowed people to visit churches from yesterday. And finally, professional sports made a comeback this weekend for the first time since the coronavirus lockdown. Bloomberg's Stefan Nicola has more on Germany's Football League kick-starting.
Officials had introduced many hygiene rules, from testing players and banning fans from stadiums to forcing coaches to wear masks. It was an eerie experience watching this on TV. You could hear every pass, every tackle echo through the arenas. Players needed 30 minutes to adjust until Dortmund's Erling Haaland scored the first post-lockdown goal against rivals Schalke. It remains to be seen how much interest the competition can generate. In Berlin, Germany, Stefan Nicola, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Goins. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, thank you very much for that. Great to get the global headlines from you. We take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Peter Shafrick. This is Bloomberg.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Take the Bond Challenge. Use the free Interactive Brokers Bond Scanner to search their deep availability of U.S. government securities, 38,000 global corporate bonds, and 850,000 municipals. IBKR passes through the highest of all bids and lowest of all offers received at the electronic venues it accesses. We do not widen spreads, apply hidden fees, or mark up quotes. How many basis points does your current broker keep? Find out at ibkr.com/bonds.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Nah. Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Helen is dreaming of fighting a flock of 40-foot flamingos. But in reality, she's helping fight COVID-19 in her sleep. Like thousands of others, she's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments. I'll fight you. Keep fighting, Helen. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dream Lab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
The force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it. You have that power too.
For the first time ever, stream the complete Skywalker saga, all in one place. 9 incredible films, one epic story, only on Disney+.
The Force will be with you, always.
The Skywalker Saga on Disney+, now streaming. 18+ subscription required. T's and C's apply.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's headquarters in London, this is a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So in the markets right now, we're up by 2.1% on US Stock 600 markets. The FTSE 100 also gaining 2.4%. So a lot of momentum with the Xetra DAX rising 2.9% this morning. We had a positive trading session in the Asian equity trading this morning. As for US equity futures, S&P 500 E-mini futures up by 1.6%. That was despite the warning on Friday from the Fed's Powell about how long it will take for the US economy potentially to recover, and also the risks of what happens to asset prices if there is an even worse kind of continuation of the pandemic, a second wave, etc. As for the bond markets this morning, we trade for US benchmark yields on the 10-year at 64 basis points, negative 55 basis points for German yields, so down by 2 basis points. An even bigger slide though for Italian BTP yields, dropping 8.5 basis points at 1.77%. The other big news stories, though, have been around the oil markets, where we actually see WTI crude futures above $30 a barrel for the first time in 2 months, up by 5.3% this morning. Brent crude trades at $33.69, and we also get a big gain for gold, up by 1% at $17.61 a troy ounce. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index slightly stronger. The pound weak at 1/10%, 121.05. The euro trades at 1.0808, also slightly weaker at 1/10%. That is a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, here is Leanne Garrett with all the latest in world and national news. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning and thank you. Later today will be the first meeting of the World Health Organization and its governing body since the coronavirus outbreak began, and China will be challenged on two of its most sensitive issues. Those are how Beijing first handled the virus and the status of Taiwan's participation. The EU and Australia are expected to push for an investigation into the origin of the virus. Now, Germany has recorded a small increase in coronavirus cases, though the daily death toll has fallen. There were 617 new cases this morning, bringing the total to just under 176,400. Meanwhile, several European cities are easing their lockdown rules today. The UK, Italy and Spain all recorded their lowest death tolls since March over the weekend. And finally, the UK is hoping to develop a new weapon against the pandemic. Coronavirus sniffer dogs. A £500,000 programme will back clinical trials to train dogs to see if they can spot the virus before symptoms even appear. For the initial phase, NHS staff and London hospitals will train 6 dogs to sniff odour samples from the infected and from the uninfected. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Dogs are the best.
They are the best. And these 6 dogs have already been trained to sniff out other things, so cancer and malaria, so they're well equipped for their new mission. And one of the dogs is called Digby. I thought that was a great name for a dog.
I wish they could sniff out bull markets. You know?
That would be very helpful.
If you had a dog that was like, pull the trigger now. All right. Thanks very much, Leanne Gerrans, for that. Let's get over to Nathan Hager. He is getting ready in, I believe, in the Delmarva area for Daybreak US.
Somewhere in the greater Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. That's true.
For our European and British listeners who don't know, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, those 3 states hit each other at the Washington, D.C. metro area, and do we call that Delmarva, or did I make that up?
No, Delmarva is one of them. I just appreciate you not calling the region the DMV. That's the new moniker that's
nobody wants to go to the DMV.
That's what I'm saying, right?
But everyone wants to hear Daybreak with you and Karen up next. What have you got?
Well, we're looking at risk on morning, at least a risk on potential start to the week here with optimism over economies, reopening, markets getting unprecedented central bank support. At the same time, the top central banker in the world, Fed Chairman Powell, is warning the recovery could stretch into the end of next year. Tensions continue to ramp up with China over the origins of the outbreak. There could be plenty more developments on that this week with the World Health Organization meeting. Good time to talk with Dennis Gardman. Former publisher of the Gardman Letter is with us for the hour with his take on the shape of the recovery and the path ahead for markets as the pandemic continues. So hope you will join me and Karen Moscow for that coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Matt.
That's Dennis Gartman has been amazing of late. We saw him on TV last week, or we didn't see him, actually. We had him via telephone on TV, so we heard him on TV. This is the great equalizer for radio and TV, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Everybody's remoting in one way or another. That's right.
Well, looking forward to hearing what Dennis has to say. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow up next. If you're listening on Sirius XM, channel 119, you will hear them. And good morning to you. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
All right, let's talk a bit about the markets then, shall we, with our next guest, Peter Shafrick, Global Macro Strategist at RBC, who joins us this morning, just as there is this note of real optimism, I guess, in the equity markets this morning, even though global central banks are warning that the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic may take years. I mentioned the Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He told CBS that he expects any US rebound to stretch up to the end of next year. The Bank of England's chief economist, Aldi Haldane, has said that he is examining negative rates as the UK slump begins, I guess, here in Britain. Peter, really good to have you on the programme. We've got a lot of European data this week, including UK data, unemployment figures, PMI data. Do you expect the numbers to confirm the central bank's view, the concern around the economic impact?
Well, I think we have to differentiate very clearly. On the one hand, if you look at data such as the unemployment data, it's quite backward-looking. And it basically tells us what we sort of already know, that where we come from is a very, very dreadful place, economically speaking and otherwise. But I think what's more telling is, and I think you mentioned it just now, is what are the central banks expecting going forward, and what are they planning on doing? And I think one of the interesting things this morning, you just also said that there's quite a bit of optimism in the market. For once, we have optimism in the equity and the bond market, and I think that's quite telling as well, because I think the equity in the equity market stems, at least in part, from the positive comments that drive the bond market, such as potential negative rates, such as doing more, and so on and so on.
What do you think about, the difference, Peter, between the current crisis and the great financial crisis is that right now governments are spending more and borrowing more than central banks are buying. And during the great financial crisis, central banks were expanding their balance sheet at a pace that far outdid government issuance. So do you think that the central banks need to do more now?
Well, I think so far there is not necessarily that necessity is not necessarily there, but I think we could be going there, particularly in the UK. I think that's very likely going to be the next step, and we are forecasting another 200 billion worth of QE, for instance, to be announced in June. Now, the crux of the matter, however, is when you look at what the central banks are generally doing, I think they're much more pushing into the non-sovereign sector, and that goes to the heart of what this crisis is. Whereas in the financial crisis, what we had is we had a crisis that was, as the name suggests, in the financial sector, and direct involvement from the government through the bank bailouts, and hence this was appropriate. Now it is spread out through the economy, through the corporate sector, all the way down to the SMEs, and that's where the central banks are pushing much more than before. So generally speaking, overall, I think the central banks are obviously doing way more than they did in the global financial crisis.
Yeah, and that idea of 200 billion more from the Bank of England is significantly more than many people anticipate. Do you think they were going to get negative rates for the US and the UK? If so, when?
Well, for the US, I think we as a house, and certainly that's also what the Fed is suggesting, we don't think that this is really very likely, at least in the near term. And we have to appreciate when we look towards the US from a European perspective, that the financial architecture is very different. And Powell mentioned that, and other Fed speakers mentioned that, particularly sort of the role that the money market funds are playing is very different to Europe. When you look at Europe, and particularly the UK, we'll have to see. I mean, this intervention from Haldane, I think it's potentially quite significant. Again, I don't think that we will see this in the very near term, but certainly when we've exhausted the other avenues, it's interesting to see that they're at the very least now talking about it, which previously they didn't say so.
All right, Peter, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time this morning, and I believe you'll be going on Bloomberg Surveillance as well. So we'll hear you there, and we'll see you there if we switch over to the television, or will see probably your picture while you talk to them on the phone. Peter Shafrick, global macro strategist at RBC. There's a lot going on, so definitely you want to stay tuned if you're on London DAB Digital for that. If you are in New York or on the East Coast or just in America somewhere, you will hear Daybreak out of the U.S. And remember, Dennis Gartman's coming on today, so definitely stay tuned on Sirius XM, channel 119. This is Bloomberg.
The market is unpredictable. A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the Uswitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, May 18th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Stocks are rising on optimism. Businesses are reopening across major economies.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell warns the recovery could stretch through the end of next year.
And the World Health Organization's governing body holds its first meeting since the coronavirus outbreak.
Governor Cuomo pleaded for more New Yorkers to get tested for the coronavirus. Plus, New York's mayor criticizes crowds outside bars. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The latest on the legal woes of the Giants' DeAndre Baker. And live sports is back. A NASCAR race held without fans in South Carolina.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS.
And futures are on the rise this morning. 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 46 points this morning. Dow futures up 384. NASDAQ futures up 138. The DAX in Germany's up 2.8%. CAC in Paris up 2.3%. So is the FTSE 100. 10-year Treasury up 132nd. Yield 0.63%. The yield on the 2-year 0.13%. And NYMEX crude oil's up more than 5% at $30.97 a barrel. Nathan.
Karen, will have more on the markets in just a moment. First, let's get the latest on the coronavirus live with Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Nathan. Nearly 1.5 million Americans have been infected with COVID-19. More than 89,000 have died. Dr. Tom Inglesby directs the Center for Health Security at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. He tells NBC's Meet the Press the top line for COVID-19 infections and deaths in the U.S. is going down. But it may be a different story at the state and local level.
There are some states that are still having increasing daily numbers of cases, some states that are flat, some states that are going down. So you really need to know the story. You need to ask questions in your own state about how things are going.
Meantime, the White House casting even more blame on China. Trade advisor Peter Navarro suggesting Beijing allowed the pathogen to spread.
The Chinese, behind the shield of the World Health Organization, for 2 months hid the virus from the world and then sent hundreds of thousands of Chinese on aircraft to Milan, New York, and around the world to seed that.
Well, Navarro spoke on ABC's This Week. Meet the Press, and This Week can be heard every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio. Karen and Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. In Geneva today, it is the first meeting of the World Health Organization's governing body since the coronavirus outbreak began. And China will be challenged on 2 of its most sensitive issues. Those are how Beijing first handled the virus and the status of Taiwan's participation. We get the latest from Bloomberg China correspondent Tom McKenzie.
The US wants Taiwan to attend as an observer. This is something of a red line for China. The issue of Taiwan, of course, it's a demand that has really rankled China. And of course, it's something that they're going to push back on very hard indeed. The EU and Australia, meanwhile, are expected to push for an investigation into the origins of the virus. Now, the state media here have suggested that maybe they might at some point agree to a World Health Organization-led investigation, but they're at pains to say that it's got to be, in China's eyes, fair and scientific.
And that's Tom McKenzie reporting. The official Xinhua news agency says President Xi Jinping will address the World Health Organization's decision-making body.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says the U.S. recovery could drag through 2021. Powell told the CBS News program 60 Minutes the economy will recover steadily through the second half of this year, but he says a full recovery depends on people being confident, and that may not happen until there's a vaccine.
It's going to take a while for us to get back, but I would just say this. In the long run, and even in the medium run, you wouldn't want to bet against the American economy. This economy will recover. It may take a while. It may take a period of time. It could stretch through the end of next year. We really don't know.
60 Minutes can be heard every Sunday night on Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington.
This week's U.S. economic data will add scope to the damage wrought by the virus pandemic, and Bloomberg's Vinny Dowd-Giudice reports.
The virus is in charge right now and probably will be until there's a vaccine. Minutes of the Federal Reserve's last policy meeting could shed light on the central bank's options for adding emergency stimulus. A major challenge, historic unemployment in a matter of weeks. Economists are forecasting states process 2 million more jobless claims in the past week, lifting the total since March to close to 40 million claims. We'll also get forward-looking data, the market PMI for factories and services, and the Conference Board's index of leading economic indicators. Anticipate weakness. Vinny Dowd-Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thanks. In Asia, Japan's economy fell into recession last quarter, and that decline is likely to steepen. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis reports.
GDP shrank an annualized 3.4% from the previous quarter. The result slightly better than an estimated drop of 4.5%. But conditions are expected to get a whole lot worse. Households are limiting spending and companies are cutting investment, production, and jobs. Analysts see a 21.5% contraction in the 3 months through June. We haven't seen a number like that since 1955. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. Thailand's economy contracted in the first quarter for the first time since 2014 as the coronavirus outbreak cut off tourist arrivals and shuttered commerce. Gross domestic product shrank 1.8% from a year ago.
Ryanair, Europe's biggest low-cost carrier, says the coronavirus crisis will reduce passenger numbers by half over the next year. Earlier on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary talked about what precautions his airline will take.
Social distancing is not possible. It's not incredibly difficult. It's simply impossible in mass transit. It's not possible in a train station or a train carriage. It's not possible in the London Underground or in an underground carriage. And it's not possible at an airport or on board an aircraft. Therefore, we need effective health prevention health measures like face masks. And we've already rolled a 3-minute video. We're requiring all passengers and our crews to wear face masks. Face masks do eliminate 98.5% of the risk of the spread of COVID-19.
O'Leary aims to resume flying in July in a bid to at least some revenue this summer.
Apple will reopen more than 25 stores across the U.S. this week. Another dozen will reopen in Canada. Some stores will offer only curbside or storefront service. That adds to the almost 100 Apple stores worldwide that have reopened to customers after the coronavirus forced them to close. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:07 on Wall Street. Now let's get the latest world and national news headlines. Here's Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Governor Andrew Cuomo pleaded for more New Yorkers to get tested for the coronavirus as the state reopens for business, as he underwent a nasal swab test himself at his daily briefing. The governor said, "I am not in pain, I am not in discomfort," after a doctor inserted a long swab into his nostril to collect a sample. Cuomo went on to say, "There is no reason why you should not get the test."
They can't say it's inconvenient because we have 700 sites. They can't say they're not eligible because you have any symptoms, you're eligible.
The news comes as the governor announced the western and capital regions have qualified on the metrics to reopen. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio admonished people seen crowding outside bars over the weekend without face masks. The mayor says we are not going to tolerate people starting to congregate. If we have to shut places down, we will. De Blasio announced the city has partnered with CityMD, one of the largest urgent care companies in the city, to do 6,000 tests daily.
This is the diagnostic testing, the PCR testing. It will be available at all CityMD sites all around New York City.
De Blasio also says beaches in the city will remain closed through Memorial Day, saying we're just not there yet. Non-essential businesses in parts of New Jersey will reopen today with curbside pickup. Meanwhile, Governor Phil Murphy addressed the racial disparity in the number of coronavirus cases. Murphy says the lack of adequate health care in minority communities has made the population more vulnerable.
This virus didn't create that, but it laid it all bare for everybody to see if they didn't know it already, and it's our job collectively to make sure we address that.
Former President Obama criticized U.S. leaders overseeing the nation's response to the coronavirus, telling college graduates in an online commencement address that the pandemic shows many officials aren't even pretending to be in charge. President Trump was asked about the comments.
Look, he was an incompetent president. That's all I can say. Grossly incompetent.
President Trump said that the return of professional sports was essential for the psyche of our country as it rebounds from the coronavirus pandemic. The president promised robust virus testing for athletes and spectators as he called into the broadcast of a charity event yesterday. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
And speaking of sports, Michael, it's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time to get the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
All right, thanks, Nathan. The first major live sporting event in over 9 weeks. NASCAR, Darlington, South Carolina. Thousands of fans were in the parking lot, but none were allowed in. Auto racing, the rare sport that due to the sound of the engines, viewers on TV don't really hear crowd noise anyway, and obviously drivers in their cars don't have to worry about social distancing. Kevin Harvick, who had the most points on the season coming in, led most of the way, got his 50th career victory. Ryan Newman, back racing 3 months after a scary crash at Daytona, finished 15th. There was also Skins Golf for COVID-19 charity at the Seminole course in Florida. That was a little more unusual. Players wearing shorts and carrying their own bags. It ended with Rory McIlroy closest to the pin on the par 3 17th hole, giving he and Dustin Johnson a come-from-behind victory over Ricky Fowler and 21-year-old Matthew Wolff, and all over $5 million was raised. This Sunday, also in Florida, more charity golf. The team of Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning against Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. Real PGA golf returns June 11th with the Colonial in Texas. The Giants starting cornerback DeAndre Baker surrendered to authorities in Miramar, Florida, spent Saturday night in jail, released yesterday on a $200,000 bond. He's been charged with 4 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm. The Giants have told Baker to not be part of any of their offseason team-wide meetings. Good news on former Mets manager Art Howe, out of the hospital in Houston, recovering from coronavirus. 73-year-old Howe had been in intensive care. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, a pair of sneakers that Michael Jordan once wore in a game has been sold for a record $560,000. That is almost 4 times what Sotheby's initially estimated. That auction coincided with the release of the ESPN Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. The 10-part series wrapped up last night. Futures moving higher as we kick off a new week. S&P futures up 42 points. Dow futures up 360. NASDAQ futures higher by 124 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires. Which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Have you wanted to speak?
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes!
With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. It would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Here's Youssef Kamel El-Din.
Speculators betting that Saudi Arabia will be forced to abandon its currency peg are skating on thinner ice. 12 months forward contracts on the real have retreated from recent highs that mirrored the oil price plunge. Goldman Sachs argues that a devaluation would be near-term beneficial only if the magnitude of that devaluation is very large. Let's get more on this with Farouk Sousa. He's the Vice President for MENA Economics Research at Goldman Sachs Group. It does make sense, but under very specific circumstances.
Only if the devaluation is very large, like you said. We think that the only way a devaluation can actually help the
the fiscal or the external outlook is by suppressing domestic demand very significantly through like an income effect, basically making people a lot poorer. And the only way you're going to have a magnitude big enough to reduce imports in a country like Saudi Arabia, where not very much is produced locally, is by devaluing something like maybe anywhere between 50 and 80%. We probably think at the higher end of that range. And we think that's going to have a pretty big impact on, domestic monetary stability, on the credibility of monetary policy, on investment going forward, and so on. So the costs are really, really large associated with that kind of magnitude of devaluation, which makes it relatively unlikely in our view.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are climbing in Europe alongside U.S. stock index futures as investors find reason for encouragement with businesses reopening across major economies. And after shares slumped last week, oil is rising above $30 a barrel for the first time in 2 months as producers in the U.S. and elsewhere continue to cut activity, helping to rebalance a market that was thrown into disarray by the coronavirus lockdowns. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 42 points. Dow futures up 357. NASDAQ futures up 119. The DAX in Germany's up 2.8%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32nd, yield 0.63%. The yield on the 2-year 0.13%. NYMEX crude oil is up 5.5%, up $1.63 at $31.06 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.9% or $14.80 at $17.71.10 an ounce. The euro 1.0801 against the dollar. British pound 1.2110, and the yen is at 107.28. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Around the world, there are 4.7 million cases of coronavirus, with about 315,000 deaths. The number of coronavirus cases over the weekend in Texas hit the highest daily rate since the state started tracking data. It comes as more businesses reopen in the state today. The Florida Keys will reopen to tourists on June 1st, more than 2 months after the island closed to visitors to minimize the spread of the virus. Hotels and other lodging establishments will also be allowed to reopen at 50% capacity. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and with us for the hour this morning, Dennis Gartman, former publisher of the Gartman Letter. Good to talk with you, as always, Dennis. And we are certainly seeing a lot of optimism, particularly in equity markets this morning. Do you share that positive sentiment, given so many major economies are beginning to reopen now?
Well, first of all, let's be grateful that so many economies are beginning to open up. That's a great thing. Do I share the optimism? No, not really. I trade only for my own account at this point and have been for the past several months. And I'm actually marginally net short of the U.S. equities market and have been since Thursday of 2 weeks ago. Clearly, for the last 48 hours, I'm wrong. But also, I've been long of gold and now even more aggressively long of silver, predicated in euro terms. And that is doing demonstrably better than is the equities market. So I don't share the same sense of optimism, and especially after the comments from Mr. Powell last night on CBS. What was it? He was less than excited about the domestic economy going into this year, thinking that the recession could last until 2021. I actually share that opinion, and I'm surprised that the market is taking that as being responsibly bullish. I guess the market believes that the Fed will become expansionary than it has been, and that expansionary monetary policy leaches its way into the equities market. So no, I'm not nearly as optimistic as other people are.
Well, do you think that the Fed will continue to be expansionary? It did seem as though Chairman Powell was signaling that pretty strongly, not just on the 60 Minutes interview, but in his comments from Wednesday.
I don't think the Fed has any choice. The Fed, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Canada, the Swiss National Bank, they are all monetarily expansionary. They have to remain so. They have really no choice. It's just a matter of how expansionary shall they be, how large will their asset bases continue to be expanded. And my response is they will be even more expansionary than they have been thus far. So yes, they will be, and let us hope that they shall be. If they don't, it would be terribly detrimental to the equities market and terribly detrimental to the economy.
What do you think further expansionary policy from the Fed will look like? Do you think negative interest rates are still on the table?
Well, the market seems to think that they're on the table. Mr. Powell seems to think that they're off the table. I think that really what will end up happening is the Fed will become, and so shall the other monetary authorities, become buyers of their longer term at the far end of the yield curves. The Fed will be there to buy mortgages. The Fed will be there to buy Treasury securities in an aggressive and abundant supply. So that's where it will really happen. I really don't care where the overnight Fed funds rate goes. What I'm far more interested in is where is the 10-year and where is the 30-year, and both of those yields are probably going to hold as the monetary authorities remain expansionary. They have no choice.
What about yield curve targeting? Is that something that you're indicating as well and thinking that the Fed is considering?
Yeah, I think that they're actually far more interested in targeting the yield curve. But again, as I said, I think they'll be far more interested in buying the longer end of the curve. That's where money really can sit for a longer period of time. If you're expansionary at the short end of the curve, it is by definition short term. If you're expansionary at the long end of the yield curve, it is by definition long term. And I think they'll do far more. I think they'll be far more aggressive buying 10-year, 20-year, 30-year Treasury securities than they shall than anything else.
That kind of targeting of the yield curve, how does that potentially affect the shape of the recovery itself? We did hear Powell mention that he thinks that it's possible that the recovery could extend into the end of next year. We've also heard a lot of talk about a lot of choppiness in the recovery, that it could be more of a series of W's.
That's been my response. I think it'll be there will not be a V-shaped recovery. There will not be a swoosh-shaped recovery. There will be a limited W or a double W-shaped recovery, where a bounce, another bounce, another bounce, another bounce, another bounce. Each bounce getting less and less exacting, less and less active, and it will be protracted and languish on late into next year. There's just so much damage that has been done, so much psychological damage, so much fiscal damage that has been done to the economy and to the consumer, that it'll take a lot longer than people anticipate before we get a demonstrative return to stronger economic environments.
Do you see a W-shaped recovery being mirrored in equity markets then, that we could see a lot of choppiness in asset prices?
Well, actually, by my bet, I'm betting that we make new lows, that we at least test the old lows. But right now, let's be blunt, Nathan, I'm wrong for the last 48 hours.
Right. Well, if we do test those lows, given the at least in the short term, when do you think we could see that test?
Sometime later this summer, or on into the autumn of this coming year, especially if we have a rebound in the virus circumstances around the country, which we probably shall. Let us hope that I'm wrong. Let us hope that we find a vaccine. Let us hope that we have therapeutics. Let us hope that the warm weather diminishes the effects of the virus. But I have my doubts, and right now the fact that we have not taken out the highs made Thursday of 2 weeks ago, I'll still be short. Am I going to add to it? Not until it proves that I'm right.
Dennis Gardman, former publisher of the Gardman Letter. Looking forward to talking with you again in the second half of this hour. We'll get into commodity prices and your outlook on that as well. In the meantime, we are seeing green on the screen for equities for sure. S&P futures higher by 43 points right now, and Dow futures are up 367 points. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stock futures are rising on this Monday as investors take encouragement from signs of businesses beginning to reopen following shutdowns amid the coronavirus pandemic. This week brings several reports to gauge the impact of the pandemic on the economy, including monthly updates from the housing market and the weekly job claims. The Fed releases minutes from its most recent meeting. Several retailers report their earnings this week, including JCPenney, which filed for bankruptcy on Friday. The 118-year-old company calls it a prearranged bankruptcy, which means the restructuring plan has some creditor support. But some investors worry Penny's lacks enough attractive assets to support a restructuring. Some stores will be closed permanently, with locations to be announced in the coming weeks. Penny was already weighed down by debt, changing consumer tastes and mall struggles. Now it's impossible to raise money by holding going out of business sales at stores because so much of retail remains shuttered because of COVID-19. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
The Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are rising and oil is trading at a 2-month high. As we begin a new trading week, investors seem to be encouraged in signs businesses are reopening across major economies.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is downplaying suggestions that the U.S. faces a second Great Depression, but he is taking care not to promise a swift so-called V-shaped rebound. Powell was interviewed on the CBS News program 60 Minutes. He says the U.S. recovery could stretch through the end of next year.
Assuming there's not a second wave of the coronavirus, I think you'll see the economy recover steadily through the second half of this year. For the economy to fully recover, people will have to be fully confident, and that may have to await the arrival of a vaccine.
60 Minutes can be heard Sunday nights on Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington.
The World Health Organization's governing body will hold its first meeting since the coronavirus outbreak began. The Xinhua news agency reports President Xi Jinping will address the organization.
Japan has fallen into a recession. The world's third largest economy shrank at an annualized rate of 3.4% in the first quarter.
Wall Street will remain focused this week on the global response to the coronavirus, ongoing trade tensions with China, and earnings. We get more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pillett.
With most Americans stuck at home and unemployment the highest since the Great Depression era, people have been sharply reducing their spending. Jonathan Golub is chief U.S. equity strategist at Credit Suisse Securities.
The cyclical part of the market, and now we're talking about the auto companies and the retailers, the restaurants, hotels, industrials alike. In the second quarter, they're expected to be down between 90 and 100%, which means that 25% or so of the market will make absolutely no profits whatsoever.
This week we'll be hearing from a number of high-profile retailers, including Walmart, Home Depot, Kohl's, Lowe's, Target, L Brands, TJX, and Best Buy. Charlie Pillett, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. S&P futures are up about 40 points this morning. Dow futures up 333. NASDAQ futures up 107. The DAX in Germany is up 2.6%. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 0.64%, and the yield in the 2-year 0.13%. NYMEX crude oil is up 5.7%, up $1.68 to $31.11 a barrel. And COMEX gold is up 0.7%, or $12.10 at $17.68.40 an ounce. The euro, 1.0806 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
Okay, Karen, thank you. It is 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo called for more New Yorkers to get tested for COVID-19 as the state reopens for business. Cuomo underwent a nasal swab test himself at his daily briefing. He also announced 2 regions of New York State that have had good, steady numbers.
There's been a shift in the capital region and in western New York, where on the 7 metrics, they are now qualified for reopening.
Cuomo added there is still a need to set up a contingency of contact tracers for possible surges. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says beaches will remain closed for Memorial Day, saying we're just not there yet. The mayor also slammed people for gathering outside bars in the city without face masks. De Blasio says he will close them down if we have to. De Blasio also announced the city has partnered with CityMD, one of the largest urgent care companies in the city, to take up the task of testing for COVID-19.
This now puts us ahead of our goal. We had said we wanted to get the capacity for 20,000 tests per day by Monday, May 25th. I can tell you we have now hit the goal a week early.
De Blasio says CityMD will do 6,000 tests daily in addition to what the city has already been doing. He says those are insured will have their insurance billed, and the CityMD is picking up the cost of the uninsured. Non-essential stores in New Jersey are set to reopen with curbside pickup today. Governor Phil Murphy says they are better prepared now to handle a surge in cases should it happen.
We need the capacities that we didn't have as a country or as a state when this started: beds, ventilators, PPE, medicines, etc.
California Governor Gavin Newsom says the Senate very much needs to start a procedure to look at the new stabilization legislation passed by the House. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Governor Newsom says the Senate Republicans flatly rejecting the funding bill is not looking at those it would benefit.
These same folks that say it's dead on arrival, I hope they'll consider this. The next time they want to salute and celebrate our heroes, our first responders, our police officers and firefighters, consider the fact that they are the first ones who'll be laid off by cities and counties.
Newsom on CNN says there must be negotiation and, most important, help. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street. Michael, time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, not a great weekend for the NFL. Ex-Giant wideout Cody Latimer now with Washington, arrested on assault and weapons charges in Colorado. Buffalo defensive lineman Ed Oliver got a DWI with gun charges in Houston. And the Giants' DeAndre Baker and Seattle's Quentin Dunbar both surrendered to authorities in Florida. Baker released on bond after spending a night in jail. He faces 4 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm, said to have been a dispute that came out of gambling losses in a dice game. The Giants have told Baker to not be part of their offseason meetings. The NHL Board of Governors will hold a call today. The Athletic has details of what hockey might look like upon its return this summer, a 3-week training camp in June, and then in July, at least some games to complete the regular season, and then an expanded 2014 playoff field, 12 in each conference. That would put the Rangers into the playoffs. In other years, they'd be out. 4 teams in each conference would get a first-round bye. 2 days ago would have been the Preakness Stakes, second jewel of racing's Triple Crown. The Kentucky Derby had already been moved to early September. Now the Preakness has a rescheduled date of October 3rd. The Belmont would presumably be sometime after that. So the Triple Crown races, normally 3 and 5 weeks, would be much more spread out. They had a NASCAR race yesterday, Darlington, South Carolina, no fans. Kevin Harvick got the win, the first real major sporting event in this country in 9 weeks. May 18th, this date in sports history, 2004, a perfect game thrown by Randy Johnson. Then with Arizona, he was 40 years old and the oldest to ever pitch a perfect game. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It is 5:37 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Hundreds of thousands of New York City residents left as the coronavirus pandemic hit. About 5% of city residents left the city between March 1st and May 1st. According to the New York Times, population fell the most in the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. Well, the global hospitality industry is facing the worst downturn in its history. New York is poised for a painful recovery. Even when travel resumes, the Manhattan hotel market's reliance on international travel and those big conferences is going to make it tough for owners to cover debt payments and labor costs. New Jersey fishing charters and other watercraft rentals resumed Sunday with social distancing measures in place. Governor Phil Murphy announced the relaxation of restrictions on watercraft Saturday. It followed a promise Thursday that New Jersey's beaches will be open for next week's Memorial Day holiday. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
Okay, Ed, thank you. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KFAB in Omaha. Meat plant communities keep seeing coronavirus spread at faster rates.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WIOD in Miami, I'm reporting Florida gyms, retailers, and restaurants reopened today under new social distancing guidelines.
I'm Caroline Hetk on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on AstraZeneca's plan to mass produce any vaccine they discover.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WFLA in Orlando, I'm reporting that Apple plans to reopen a total of more than 25 stores in Florida and a handful of other states.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting Fiat Chrysler is negotiating a nearly $7 billion loan in Italy.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. It is 5:39 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online with the cover on Remdesivir, Gilead's treatment for coronavirus. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription to Business Week at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio or watch it on YouTube. Weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device at youtube.com. Search Bloomberg Global News. Now, late Friday, J.C. Penney filed for bankruptcy. punctuating decades of decline and failed turnaround plans for the once ubiquitous mainstay of America's shopping malls. The Chapter 11 filing allows the giant department store chain to stay in business and work out a way to pay its bills. And German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron will discuss a range of topics today. Bloomberg News has learned they include a new recovery fund to help the European Union weather the worst recession in living memory. That meeting will take place by video conference. Futures higher. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC. This is your Bloomberg.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
We're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft Teams. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call us today on 0800 169 1745. That's 0800 169 1745.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report coronavirus update. The U.S. House latest coronavirus stimulus bill could come before the Senate this week with little hope of passage.
On CBS's Face the Nation, Speaker Pelosi says the state and local aid in the bill is not out of line.
Everything that we have in the state and local column there is less than the Republicans put in their tax scam to give 83% of the benefits to the top 1%.
The bill, written by House Democrats, is too partisan, says Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
There's not going to be a $3 trillion left-wing wish list.
To which Speaker Pelosi tells CBS the Senate shouldn't dismiss the House bill out of hand.
No bill that is proffered will become law without negotiations.
Linda Kenyon, Washington.
Asian stock markets have risen despite the Trump administration's decision to tighten restrictions on Chinese tech giant Huawei. Benchmarks in Shanghai, Tokyo, and Hong Kong advance. I'm John Trout.
They don't just talk to the most important people.
Is it as ominous this time around?
They talk with the most interesting people.
Are they taking this seriously?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and this update's brought to you by SEI. Since its founding 50 years ago, SEI has provided investment managers and asset owners with robust infrastructure platforms and flexible outsourcing solutions. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. Stocks climbing in Europe alongside U.S. stock index futures as investors find reason for encouragement with businesses reopening across major economies and after shares slumped last week. Gold is trading at its highest in 7 years, while West Texas Intermediate crude is rising above $30 a barrel for the first time in 2 months as producers in the U.S. and elsewhere continue to cut activity. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 42 points. Dow futures up 350. NASDAQ futures up 116. The DAX in Germany's up 2.8%. 10-year Treasury, little change. Yield 0.64%. Yield on the 2-year 0.13%. NYMEX crude oil is up 6.6%, up $1.94 at $31.37 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.8% or $13.70 at $1,770 an ounce. The euro 1.0803 against the dollar. The yen at 107.31. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the number of deaths from the coronavirus in the U.S. is approaching 90,000. Almost all states have now reopened some select businesses, with many Americans venturing outside their homes for the first time in a long time. In Florida, the state is easing restrictions on gyms. New Jersey is allowing curbside pickup at retail stores. A Canadian aerobatic jet crashed into the British Columbia neighborhood of Kamloops over the weekend during a flyover intended to boost morale during the pandemic, killing one crew member, seriously injuring another, and setting a house on fire. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it is 5:49 on Wall Street. And economist Dennis Gartman joins us once again, the former publisher of the Gartman Letter. I want to pick up, Dennis, on something you mentioned in our earlier conversation about expansionary Federal Reserve reserve policy accruing well to gold, and you're saying that you're skewing your trade even further into silver as well in euro-denominated terms. How far do you think precious metals have to run right now, given the expansionary policy from the Fed?
I think they have a lot farther to run now. First of all, silver, for example, has risen from $15 an ounce to $17.70 an ounce in the course of 4 trading sessions. Would I be a buyer of silver today up $2.70 per ounce in 4 days? No. Am I selling any of the silver that I do own at this point? No. However, any correction, and I mean any correction, any 20, 25 cent correction on the downside, intra and intraday, I think you have to be a buyer. Silver, the gold-silver ratio has gone to 100. Historically, biblically in terms, 17 to 1 is a far more rational, far more reasonable, far more effective ratio between silver and gold. At 100 to 1, silver is inordinately inexpensive. Gold is rather ordinately expensive. So I'm quietly beginning to skew my trade towards the silver market. However, I'm predicating both silver and gold in euro terms because I wish to use the currency that I think will continue to devalue, and the dollar reigns supreme. The dollar's strength, here we are at 108 versus the euro, and I think there's somebody who has been trying to support it at 108 and certainly will be giving that up in the distant future, weighs heavily upon other commodity prices. So I'm bullish of the metals. I would like to be bullish of the grains, but I have a hard time with the dollar as strong as it is.
Do you see dollar strength continuing to be the story in this market, given all the support that the Fed has given to the market?
I think the point here is that the other monetary authorities have been as expansionary, if not more expansionary, and shall begin to be even more expansionary than shall be the Fed. And the fact that the president himself, who has been a dollar bear, has quietly in the course of the past several weeks become dollar bullish, or at least no longer dollar bearish, is beneficial to the U.S. dollar. So I think once 107.90 is given in the euro, I think we're going to trade to 105 relatively quickly, and I think that will inure to the benefit of being long on the metals in euro terms.
There's been some talk of $3,000 an ounce for gold. Do you see it running that high in the long term?
Nathan, I've learned over the time that the best that one can get is the trend. So right now the trend is from the lower left to the upper right in the metals in dollar and in euro terms. All I'll say is the trend continues at this point. It will continue for a while longer. Picking a target is very difficult. If I said 3,000, if it got to 29.95, people would accuse me of being wrong. So I'll simply say that the trend will continue. It has obtained for the past several months. It will continue to obtain going into the future. That's the best that one can do.
Where do you see the trend line for oil right now? We obviously saw negative prices last month. Do you think the worst is over for oil?
Yeah, I think the worst is over for oil. Now, that doesn't mean that the worst is not over in the Permian Basin. There will be far more bankruptcies, far more shutterings of wells in the Permian and in the Bakken. But do I think that we've seen that was negative $37 per barrel for WTI a month ago, the low? Absolutely. We will not see that again. Hold on to this one in my lifetime, I hope. But will we see $45 per barrel? I doubt that very substantively. I think $30 to $35 is about as high as WTI can go for the foreseeable future.
What's your expectation when June contracts turn over tomorrow?
Your guess is as good as mine. Let us hope that all of the affected excessive positions that USO had held in the front months has run its course, and we will not see the same sort of chaos that we saw last month. Will the front month probably lose a little bit relative to the second, third, and fourth months in WTI? Probably, but will it be as anything coming close to the chaos of a month ago? Let us hope not.
Just 30 seconds left, Dennis. Do you see stability in the oil market now with economies reopening?
Yeah, actually I do. I think that we're probably going to trade between 27 to 35 for the next year or two. And if you get to $35, you want to be a seller at WTI. If we get under $27, you tend to want to be a buyer. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get quiet right around $30 and go sideways for months and months and months. I think the users will be happy at $30, and even some producers, especially the Saudis and the Russians, will be happy at $30. So let's hope that that's what prevails.
Thanks for doing this morning. Really appreciate it, Dennis. Dennis Gartman is former publisher of the Gartman Letter. Karen, over to you.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:54 on Wall Street. time for the Bloomberg Law Report. It's brought to you by American Arbitration Association. Business disputes are inevitable. Resolve faster with the American Arbitration Association, the global leader in alternative dispute resolution for over 90 years. More at adr.org. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The Food and Drug Administration has authorized a sample collection kit from Earlywell that can be used with multiple COVID-19 diagnostic tests. The U.S. women's soccer team's day in court has been pushed back until September. The team accuses the U.S. Soccer Federation of gender bias. An Environmental Protection Agency proposal would give retailers until the end of November to sell outdated wood stoves they have in stock to help make up for sales lost to stay-at-home directives.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
Now, another legal story we're watching. Former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort has been released from federal prison with about 5 years left to serve because of the risk of contracting COVID-19. There are few details on what home confinement will be like for Manafort, although it appears that there may be fewer restrictions than usual. For more, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to Edward Peterson, a Bloomberg legal reporter.
Will he have an ankle monitor on and be electronically monitored?
Well, we don't know really. Barr, what the U.S. Attorney General, when he said last month that the Bureau of Prison doesn't have the resources to monitor all these inmates that are being sent home now because of the pandemic. So he waived the requirement that they have to wear an ankle monitor, and when it's appropriate and as long as there's no risk to the public safety at large.
Are there any other checks that they're going to do on him?
Well, we don't know, to be honest, and it's because this is a very unusual situation we're in right now. Normally, when somebody is sent home to serve a few months in home confinement as the remainder of their sentence, it's kind of a transitional process so they can enter the community again. And they will have to have a landline phone where they have to call their probation officer every day, or maybe multiple times a day, or where they can be called by the probation officer. But we don't know what's going to happen right now because it's an unusual situation. Manafort has about 5 years left on his sentence, so this is not what home confinement is normally used for. There's a lot of unclarity here, but normally, yes, there would be a random drug test, it would be to make sure he's at home or have to call in every day. To what extent that's going to be applied here, it's, kind of a mystery. I think the most striking thing about his situation is that he had such a long sentence left. A very different set of circumstances than we find normally when people are sent home. And even in this pandemic crisis situation, it still is something that, raises some eyebrows.
And that's Bloomberg legal reporter Edvard Peterson speaking to Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by listening to the Bloomberg Law Show at 10 p.m. Eastern Time or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. Futures this morning are on the rise. NYMEX crude oil is gaining at $31.49 a barrel. And COMEX gold is also on the rise at $1,771.60 an ounce. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential.
Just this wall and that one to do, Dave, and then we're done. Whoop! Oh, no!
Hello, Steve the Sparky.
Pass us that roof tile, Chris.
Yep, sure. I'll be fun. Oh, no.
Saved by the gutter.
Built to rough it with contractors. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, May 18th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Stocks are rising on optimism. Businesses are reopening across major economies.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell warns the recovery could stretch through the end of next year.
And the World Health Organization's governing body holds its first meeting since the coronavirus outbreak.
Governor Cuomo pleaded for more New Yorkers to get tested for the coronavirus. Plus, New York's mayor criticizes crowds outside bars. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The latest on the legal woes of the Giants' DeAndre Baker, and live sports is back. A NASCAR race held without fans in South Carolina.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers. Savvy investors use Portfolio Analyst to create a consolidated view of their finances and check the health of their complete financial portfolio. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
And futures are on the rise this morning, 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 42 points, Dow futures up 350, NASDAQ futures up 113, the DAX in Germany's up 2.8%, 10-year Treasury little change, yield 0.64%, yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is 7% up $2.08 at $31.51 a barrel, and COMEX gold up 0.9% or $15.30 at $17.71.70 an ounce. Nathan.
Karen, thanks. We'll have more on the markets in just a moment. First, let's get the latest on the coronavirus live with Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Nathan. Nearly 1.5 million Americans have been infected with COVID-19. More than 89,000 have died. Dr. Tom Inglesby directs the Center for Health Security at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. He tells NBC's Meet the Press the top line for COVID-19 infections and deaths in the U.S. is going down, but it may be a different story at the state and local level.
There are some states that are still having increasing daily numbers of cases, some states that are flat, some states that are going down. So you really need to know the story. You need to ask questions in your own state about how things are going.
Meantime, the White House is casting even more blame on China. Trade advisor Peter Navarro suggesting Beijing allow the pathogen to spread.
The Chinese, behind the shield of the World Health Organization, for 2 months hid the virus from the world and then sent hundreds of thousands of Chinese on aircraft to Milan, New York, and around the world to seed that.
Navarro spoke on ABC's This Week. Meet the Press, and This Week can be heard every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. In Geneva today, it's the first meeting of the World Health Organization's governing body since the coronavirus outbreak began. And China will be challenged on two of its most sensitive issues. Those are how Beijing first handled the virus and the status of Taiwan's participation. We get the latest from Bloomberg China correspondent Tom McKenzie.
The U.S. wants Taiwan to attend as an observer. This is something of a red line for China. The issue of Taiwan, of course, it's a demand that has really rankled China. And, of course, it's something that they're going to push back on very hard indeed. The EU and Australia, meanwhile, are expected to push for an investigation into the origins of the virus. Now, the state media here have suggested that maybe they might at some point agree to a World Health Organization-led investigation, but they're at pains to say that it's got to be, in China's eyes, fair and scientific.
Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie reporting. The official Xinhua news agency says President Xi Jinping will address the World Health Organization's decision-making body.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says the U.S. recovery could drag through 2021. Powell told the CBS News program 60 Minutes the economy will recover steadily through the second half of this year, but he said a full recovery depends on people being confident, and that may not happen until a vaccine is available.
It's going to take a while for us to get back, but I would just say this. In long run, and even in the medium run, you wouldn't want to bet against the American economy. This economy will recover. It may take a while. It may take a period of time. It could stretch through the end of next year. We really don't know.
60 Minutes is heard Sunday nights on Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington.
This week's U.S. economic data will add scope to the damage wrought by the coronavirus pandemic, and Bloomberg's Vinny Daljunas reports.
The virus is in charge right now and probably will be until there's a vaccine. Minutes of the Federal Reserve's last policy meeting could shed light on the central bank's options for adding emergency stimulus. A major challenge, historic unemployment in a matter of weeks. Economists are forecasting states processed 2 million more jobless claims in the past week, lifting the total since March to close to 40 million claims. We'll also get forward-looking data, the market PMI for factories and services, and the Conference Board's index of leading economic indicators. Anticipate weakness. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, Vinny. In Asia, Japan's economy fell into recession last quarter, and the decline is likely to steepen. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis reports.
GDP shrank an annualized 3.4% from the previous quarter. The result slightly better than an estimated drop of 4.5%. But conditions are expected to get a whole lot worse. Households are limiting spending and companies are cutting investment, production, and jobs. Analysts see a 21.5% contraction in the 3 months through June. We haven't seen a number like that since 1955. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. Ryanair, Europe's biggest low-cost carrier, said the coronavirus crisis will reduce passenger numbers by half over the next year. Earlier on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary talked about what precautions his airline will take.
Social distancing is not possible. It's not incredibly difficult. It's simply impossible in mass transit. It's not possible in a train station or a train carriage. It's not possible in the London Underground or in an underground carriage. And it's not possible at an airport or on board an aircraft. Therefore, we need effective health prevention health measures like face masks. And we've already rolled out a 3-minute video. We're requiring all passengers and our crews to wear face masks because face masks do eliminate 98.5% of the risk of the spread of COVID-19.
O'Leary aims to resume flying in July in a bid to rescue at least some revenue this summer.
Apple will reopen more than 25 stores across the U.S. this week. Another dozen will reopen in Canada. Some stores will offer only curbside or storefront service. That adds to the almost 100 Apple stores worldwide that have reopened to customers after the coronavirus forced them to close. S&P futures higher by 43 points. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. And at 6:07 on Wall Street, we get more on what's happening around the world from Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Governor Andrew Cuomo pleaded for more New Yorkers to get tested for the coronavirus as the state reopens for business, as he underwent a nasal swab test himself at his daily briefing. The governor said, "I am not in pain, I am not in discomfort," after a doctor inserted a long swab into his nostril to collect a sample. Cuomo went on to say, "There is no reason why you should not get the test."
They can't say it's inconvenient because we have 700 sites. They can't say they're not eligible because you have any symptoms, you're eligible.
The news comes as the governor announced the western and capital regions have qualified on the metrics to reopen. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio admonished people seen crowding outside bars over the weekend without face masks. The mayor says, "We're not going to tolerate people starting to congregate. If we have to shut places down, we will." De Blasio announced the city has partnered with CityMD, one of the largest urgent care companies in the city, to do 6,000 tests daily.
This is the diagnostic testing, the PCR testing. It will be available at all CityMD sites all around New York City.
De Blasio also says beaches in the city will remain closed through Memorial Day, saying we're just not there yet. Non-essential businesses in parts of New Jersey will reopen today with curbside pickup. Meanwhile, Governor Phil Murphy addressed the racial disparity in the number of coronavirus cases. Murphy says the lack of adequate health care in minority communities has made the population more vulnerable.
This virus didn't create that, but it laid it all bare for everybody to see if they didn't know it already, and it's our job collectively to make sure we address that.
Former President Obama criticized U.S. leaders overseeing the nation's response to the coronavirus, telling college graduates in an online commencement address that the pandemic shows many officials aren't even pretending to be in charge. President Trump was asked about the comments.
Look, he was an incompetent president. That's all I can say. Grossly incompetent.
President Trump said that the return of professional sports was essential for the psyche of our nation as it rebounds from the coronavirus pandemic. President Trump promised robust virus testing for athletes and spectators as he called into the broadcast of a charity golf event yesterday. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. 6:09 on Wall Street. Let's get the Bloomberg Sports Update now. Here's John Stashower.
All right, Nathan, the first major live sporting event over 9 weeks, NASCAR, Darlington, South Carolina. Thousands of fans that were in the parking lot, but none were allowed in. Auto racing, the rare sport that due to the sound of the engines, viewers on TV don't really hear the crowd noise anyway, and obviously drivers in their cars don't have to worry about social distancing. Kevin Harvick, who had the most points on the season coming in, led most of the way, got his 50th career victory. Ryan Newman back racing just 3 months after that scary crash at Daytona, finished 15th. There was also skins golf for COVID-19 charity at the Seminole course in Florida. That was a little more unusual. Players wearing shorts and carrying their own bags. It ended with Rory McIlroy closest to the pin on the par 3 17th hole, giving he and Dustin Johnson a come-from-behind victory over Ricky Fowler and 21-year-old Matthew Wolff. In all, over $5 million was raised. This Sunday, also in Florida, more charity golf. The team of Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning against Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. Real PGA golf returns June 11th, the Colonial in Texas. Giants starting cornerback DeAndre Baker surrendered to authorities in Miramar, Florida. Spent Saturday night in jail. Released yesterday on a $200,000 bond. He's been charged with 4 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm. The Giants have told Baker to not be part of any of their offseason team-wide meetings. Good news on former Mets manager Art Howe. Out of the hospital in Houston, recovering from coronavirus. The 73-year-old Howe had been in intensive care. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Thank you, John. And a pair of sneakers that Michael Jordan once wore in a game have been sold for a record of $560,000. That's almost 4 times Sotheby's initial estimate. The auction coincided with the release of the ESPN Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. That 10-part series wrapped up last night. S&P futures higher by 44 points now. Dow futures up 374. NASDAQ futures a gain of 117 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
We're all having to get used to the new normal, and at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
TSB believe in people helping people. So if you need a repayment holiday on your TSB mortgage, loan or credit card, get in touch and TSB will do what they can to help. To apply, go to tsb.co.uk. Interest will continue to apply and you will pay more interest overall. Terms and conditions apply.
From Bloomberg Television, here's Emily Chang on Bloomberg Technology.
Headspace announced it'll begin offering free one-year subscriptions to all unemployed people in the United States. Here to tell us more, CEO Rich Pearson. Rich, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Headspace offers online meditation services and content, and this offering is really quite extraordinary. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think as COVID hit, we were trying to think about all the different ways that we could help folks, and it quickly became apparent that our service was kind of needed more now than at any other time in our company's history, in the last 10 years. And as the unemployment figures started to unfold, and a lot of our friends and family and people that we knew were starting to lose their jobs, it was pretty clear that the mental impact of that, the mental health kind of crisis that's going to come from these numbers, is going to last way into the foreseeable future. And so we wanted to kind of take the biggest swing where we felt that we could have the biggest impact with the resources available. So we decided to make it free for every single person that's unemployed they get a year's subscription. So that was the thinking behind it.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are climbing in Europe alongside U.S. stock index futures as investors find reason for encouragement with businesses reopening across major economies. And after shares slumped last week, we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 44 points this morning. Dow futures up 373. And NASDAQ futures are up 116. The DAX in Germany's up 2.8%. 10-year Treasury down 132nd, yield 0.64%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is up 7.2%, up $2.11 at $31.54 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.9% or $15.90 at $17.7220 an ounce. The euro 1.0808 against the dollar. British pound 1.2126 and the yen 107.29. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the number of coronavirus cases over the weekend Texas hit the highest daily rate since the state started tracking data. It comes as more businesses reopen in the state. The Florida Keys will reopen to tourists on June 1st, more than 2 months after the island chain closed visitors to minimize the spread of the coronavirus. Hotels and other lodging establishments will also be allowed to reopen at 50% capacity. Around the world, 4.7 million cases of the coronavirus have been reported, with more than 315,000 deaths. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. It's 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and James Athey joins us now, Senior Investment Manager at Aberdeen Asset Management. Certainly seeing a lot of positive sentiment in equity markets as we get this week started. James, what's your outlook for stocks now that more economies are opening and central banks seem more than amenable to providing liquidity?
Morning, Nathan. Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems that way, doesn't it? It doesn't take much really to get stocks hot under the collar. You know, they've got two outs really, because if the economic data or the company data, earnings data looks better, obviously that's seen to be a positive, and conversely, if things aren't looking so great in the real economy, then you've got central banks riding to their rescue. So it's kind of heads they win, tails someone else loses. But you know, philosophically, I still think there are some holes in that argument, because essentially the story goes that, you know, equities are forward-looking, they're long-term investments, and they can look through some of the short-term negativity. Realistically, that's just an argument for a structural position in equities. It really doesn't say much about the cycle or about valuation, and I think those 2 points are where I have caution with respect to stocks at the moment, which is to say they were overpriced before the virus, they're incredibly overpriced now, so you're paying a heck of a lot, you know, for each dollar of earnings, of future earnings. And I think that the ways in which central banks and governments have dealt with the short-term impact of the virus is going to have some long-term consequences, which should drag on economies as companies, you know, individuals and governments really are forced to deal with the debt burden which has appeared. So to me, there's still a lot of downside and not a huge amount of upside from equities on a fundamental basis.
So given that, are you suggesting that investors reposition out of equities and push further into safer investments?
Sure. I mean, that's how we were positioned coming into this year, you know, even absent the coronavirus, essentially for cyclical reasons. We would have, you know, we were positioned defensively. I think for most investors, you know, people in Main Street who invest in their own portfolios, it pays to have a balanced portfolio and not do a huge amount at any point in time. Certainly when you're many, many years from retirement, you just want to have a balanced portfolio and let that do its work, let your diversification do its work. But if you are trying to engage in sort of asset allocation calls, I think looking at where equities are today, it's difficult to believe that there is a strategic view that they're not overpriced relative to the likely challenges ahead. So certainly trimming some of your equity position to me makes sense. Obviously the counter argument to that is that most other asset classes are expensive as well, and that's true, but I have to be honest, even with treasuries only at 60 or 70 basis points, to me, it still seems likely that the deflationary pressures that we're likely to see in the intermediate term and the need for central banks to keep stimulus going into financial markets means that there's still an asymmetry there. It's going to be very difficult for treasury yields to sell off, but there are still lots of paths for them to rally. So yes, I favour owning a decent chunk of defensive assets, and to be honest, that includes precious metals as well.
Where do you see treasury yields going with the Federal Reserve indicating that there's pretty much no limit on the kind of support it's going to give this economy during the pandemic?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, if you thought there was a limit 6 months ago, the swiftness and the aggression of their actions, you know, really rapidly on sort of the blow up in markets following all this coronavirus stuff, that probably gave you pause for thought. So